Hi, everybody. It's Meg Medina. I'm the author of Medici Suarez Changes Gears. And I know a lot of you are stuck at home in all of the mess with this virus. And if you are writers, I'm thinking that this might be a really good time to do some heavy duty writing. That's what I'm doing anyway in my forced quiet time. So, what I wanted to do today was just come to you with a few pieces of advice about tension in a novel or in a story that you're writing. So, when sometimes people say to you, maybe not so kindly, the story was kind of boring, it was kind of flat, they're not saying that you're boring or that you're flat. What they're saying is that the tension in the story was off. The reason that the character or the reader would want to be turning the pages, it wasn't really coming together. But there are some things that you could do about that. So I thought we'd talk about them today. Okay, so the first thing I want to say about tension is that it's like a psychological trap. I had a grandmother, and my mother was this way too, who was always afraid of what was going to happen to me. I always tell this story because she was, they would always say things like, don't run down the street, you're going to fall down and scrape your face and you'll be disfigured forever. Don't, walk around with your coat open, you'll get a pneumonia and you'll die. It was always one terrible thing after another. It was always the psychological trap, the worry of what would happen if. When you're writing, you kind of have to create that psychological trap. What would happen if? What would happen if Voldemort really wins? What would happen if your hero doesn't succeed? What would happen if he fell into that hole? If she climbed that tree and the branch fell? Those are the kinds of things you're trying to create. So you have to be thinking, how can I trap my reader? How can I really make them worry? So I think that we make readers worry in two big ways. The first way is that we could get our characters to help them worry. We have to get readers to love our characters. So when you're creating characters in your story, you want to make sure you're creating characters that the reader can get behind, one way or the other, whether it's the antagonist, right, the bad guy or the bad woman in your story, or the good guys. They still have to be relatable, rich. You have to worry about how you're writing their dialogue and did you describe them well and all of those things. You know how to write characters, I think. But when I'm thinking about tension, I ask myself different questions about the character. The first is I asked myself, how can I make them imbalanced? How can I make them a little off kilter so that I can't quite trust them the way I should? So I'm thinking of stories where the character is a liar, for example. Or if the character really has like a big problem or a big secret that they're hiding. I give them some aspect of their life or their personality that makes them untrustworthy. So that when you're reading them, you're like, would they lie about this? Would they do that? Would they take that risk for this? So that's one way. Think about your characters and how you can make them unreliable. When I'm writing the antagonist, right, the bad person in the novel, the one who's fighting against my protagonist, I really have to think beyond the twirling mustache bad guy, right? That's no fun. That's flat. If they're too bad, if everything about them is bad, that, they have bad breath and they're not very bright and they're really mean and all bad things, they're not very compelling. I have to create a person who's an antagonist who could really win, who's got the skill to win, who might have, the power to win. I have to give them some qualities that are really kind of exciting. Maybe they're really smart. It's hard to tangle with somebody really smart, right? Especially if they're evil and smart. Maybe they're very beautiful, very whatever it is. But I try to create an antagonist who's rich also, rich in their personality qualities, so that it's not easy for the reader to just say, bad guy, and not really worry about them. I want them to be worried, remember? Okay, so that's characters. The other way that we could build tension is with the plot. So the plot is what's happening in your story, right? The events. But it's not only what is happening, it's also how you tell us what's happening. I run into this sometimes when I'm writing a novel. I print them out chapter by chapter, and then I put the whole thing on the floor sometimes. Sometimes I do it electronically, but I also like to see it physically on the floor. And then I have to move things around to make everything make sense, or to make it feel tense. Like, I wrote a novel for teens called Burn Baby Burn, and it was set in New York in 1977. And in that novel, there were horrible things that happened that summer, real things that happened in history. There were girls murdered that summer. There was a blackout. There was all kinds of things like that. And I had to tell the fictional story, the story that I was telling, in between all those real things that happen at really specific times. But I had to really carefully shift things so that you could always feel like the killer was getting closer, the stakes were getting higher and higher. And you have to look at that, like, how am I telling the story? Is every scene sort of making the stakes higher and higher? Am I more and more worried as I write through the story? The other thing that's really true is that you have to be willing to make your characters suffer, especially the good guys, right? Your main character has to suffer. As your reader, I want to get to the part in the book where I do this. Oh no! Are they going to get out of this? How could they possibly? No, it's all over. It's done. Like, that is what makes me turn the page, when I am sure that there is no possible way out of this. Now, the hard part is that you have to create that, and then you have to think of a really cool way out, not just, and I woke up from my dream, or anything like that. You have to give it a lot of thought to get yourself back out of that hole. But you have to make those characters really suffer in your plot. And then finally, I'm going to give you the hint that I got really from Stephen King. He has this great book for the high school writers out there on writing. And one of the things that he does in film is called the hint, the callback, and the reveal. So in the beginning of the movie, you might see the character meet up with this person, and she seems very lovely, and oh my goodness, she's helping him out of the snow. His car has run off the road. Please come to my cabin. Let me help you. I'm your number one fan, right? She seems a little odd. That's the hint. But we don't know really why. We just have a hint. Later in the story, we see her with a hammer. We see that she's not flexible. We see that she's actually kind of really disturbed, right? And then later, the payoff, the reveal, is when she, in the movie, she actually does take that hammer to his knees so that he can't leave that cabin, because she's his number one fan, right? So the hint, the callback, and the reveal. So when you're revealing characters in the plot, like as things are going on, don't tell me all about your character at the beginning. Tell me a little bit about them, and then a little bit more that's important in the plot later, and then the big kapow later. So I hope that helps as you're writing your stories. The idea is always to make me worried, to make me want to see what happens next. So after you write your draft, pull out and ask yourself those things about your characters, about the order of things, about how you've told the tale, about how you have paced it. Anyway, happy writing. Let me know how it goes. Stay safe.